I made the decision to visit my husband's mistress in the hospital. Not to scream, not to fight, but to understand. To look her in the eyes and see what she had that I didn't after 30 years of marriage. But when I pushed open the door to that hospital room, everything I thought I knew about my life shattered. The bag slipped from my trembling hands, and the sound echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. That moment, the blur of white sheets, the smell of disinfectant, the silence before recognition, was the end of the woman I used to be. Before we go any further, I want to thank you for being here with me today. If you're watching this, hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to share with you isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about survival, about a woman who learned that love can be the most dangerous lie of all. The corridors of Charleston Mercy Hospital stretched endlessly before me that Tuesday afternoon. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that sickly white glow that makes even the living look half dead. Every step of my low heels clicked against the polished tile like a countdown to my own execution. I clutched my brown leather purse to my chest like armor, my wedding ring biting into my skin with each squeeze. Room 212. I had repeated that number for days, like a curse I couldn't escape. It took me 3 weeks to find the courage to come here, 3 weeks of sleepless nights, untouched dinners, and watching my husband Richard slip further and further away from me. Every lie he told built another wall between us until I could no longer see the man I had loved since I was 26. I stopped outside the door. Riley Harper, 29 years old. That was all I knew about her, the woman who had been sharing my husband's life. 29. She wasn't even born when I met Richard. I was already paying his rent, sewing his torn suits, and helping him chase dreams that eventually became our reality. My hands shook as I reached for the handle. Through the small glass window I could see the edge of a hospital bed, the pale green curtain drawn halfway. I had rehearsed this moment so many times at home, how I'd walk in with dignity, look her straight in the eye, and ask one question: was he worth destroying a family for? I took a slow breath, steady, clinical, like I used to when comforting patients before surgery. You've seen worse, Laura, I told myself. You've faced loss, pain, death. You can face this. But none of my 30 years as a nurse prepared me for what I saw when I opened that door. The afternoon sunlight poured through the window, wrapping the room in a soft golden haze. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Richard. My husband, the same man who had kissed me on the cheek that morning and said he had a client meeting. He was holding a spoon, feeding applesauce to the young woman lying against the pillows. It wasn't the feeding that broke me. It was the tenderness. The way he dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin, the way his voice softened as he whispered something that made her smile. It was the look, the same look he used to give me when I was sick, the same gentle devotion he'd once saved for me alone. And there, glinting under the hospital light, was the watch. The silver anniversary watch I'd spent 3 months saving for, working double shifts, skipping lunches, just to surprise him on our 30th anniversary. The back of it engraved, "Forever yours, Laura." He wore it now while feeding another woman. Riley wasn't what I expected. She wasn't glamorous or seductive. She looked fragile, her hair pulled back, her skin pale against the white sheets. She looked like someone I might have cared for, once someone's daughter, someone's patient. But the way Richard looked at her, God help me, it was the look of a man completely gone. My purse slipped from my hands. Lipstick, keys, glasses all scattered across the floor in a clatter that made both of them turn. Richard's face drained of color. The spoon froze midair. Our eyes met, and 30 years of marriage disintegrated in a single heartbeat. "Laura," he whispered, voice strangled. This isn't." But I didn't stay to hear his excuses. I stumbled backward, fumbling for the doorframe, breath catching in my throat. The antiseptic smell burned my nose. The lights were too bright, the air too thin. I ran. Down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the visitors carrying flowers and balloons. I ran until I reached the parking lot. Only when I was inside my car did I finally collapse, clutching the steering wheel as sobs tore through my chest. 30 years. 30 years of cooking his favorite meals, ironing his shirts, supporting his dreams, raising his children. 30 years of believing we were partners, only to find him tenderly feeding another woman like I'd never existed. But then something changed. The tears slowed. The shaking stopped. A strange, calm clarity spread through me like cold water. I'd come to the hospital to see the woman who stole my husband. Instead, I saw the truth about the man I'd married. He hadn't just broken his vows, he'd replaced me completely. And as I sat in that car, breathing in the salt air of Charleston's early evening, I made myself a promise. I would not be another woman destroyed by betrayal. I would not fade quietly into humiliation. If Richard Bennett thought he could live a double life and leave me broken behind him, he had forgotten who I was. Because before I was his wife, I was a nurse. I noticed things. I remembered details. And when someone's life or mine was on the line, I didn't quit. That day, something inside me shifted from heartbreak to purpose. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to uncover something far darker than an affair. And when I did, Richard Bennett would finally learn what happens when a woman stops forgiving and starts fighting back. When I drove home from the hospital that evening, the streets of Charleston blurred into streaks of gray and gold outside my windshield. The city I had loved all my life, the pastel houses, the magnolia trees, the rhythm of the tide felt foreign, like I was seeing it from underwater. Everything looked normal, yet nothing was. I parked in our driveway and stared at the house Richard and I had built 25 years ago. The porch light was still on, the azaleas trimmed, the flag fluttering lazily by the mailbox. From the outside, it was a picture of stability. Inside, it was a monument to a lie. I sat there for a long time, fingers still trembling, before I finally walked in. The air smelled faintly of cedar polish, and his cologne, the same one that clung to his suit jacket earlier that morning when he'd kissed me goodbye, the same one that now reminded me of betrayal. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my phone, scrolling through photos. Our last vacation together, Hilton Head, 2 summers ago. Richard's arm around me, both of us smiling, sunburned and happy. Or pretending to be. I looked closer. In every picture, his eyes weren't smiling. They were elsewhere. That's when I realized how long he'd been gone, even while still sitting across from me. But to understand how I got there, to that empty kitchen, to that moment of collapse, you need to know who we used to be. I met Richard Bennett 31 years ago, back when I was a new nurse working the night shift at Charleston General. He was 27, working as a junior accountant at a failing firm, living off coffee and ambition. He'd come to the hospital cafeteria every night around midnight, reviewing numbers under the harsh fluorescent lights. He looked exhausted, yet determined. I admired that. I brought him extra sandwiches from the nurses' lounge, and before long, he was waiting for me each night, with a shy smile and a new story about his dream of opening his own financial advisory company one day. I believed in him more than I believed in myself back then. When his firm downsized and he couldn't afford rent, I let him stay with me. When he couldn't afford tuition for his certification program, I took extra shifts. We built our life like that, one sacrifice at a time, one dream stacked upon another. When we married, we didn't have much, just a tiny apartment near the river and matching faith that love would fix anything. For a while, it did. Years passed. His business grew. We had our children, Ethan, then Maya, and the small apartment turned into a 4-bedroom house in Mount Pleasant. He built his office downtown. I stayed at the hospital. He was charming, respected, loved by clients and neighbors. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, donated to charity, and always said the right thing. The kind of man everyone admired and I worshipped. But love, I've learned, is not destroyed by one big betrayal. It dies slowly, in whispers and late nights. The first whisper came when he changed his phone password, then the late meetings, then the new clothes, and the gym membership. I asked questions, but his answers were careful, rehearsed. "You're imagining things, Laura. Don't be dramatic. You're working too much. Go rest." Gaslighting. That word didn't exist for me back then, but that's what it was. He started keeping his phone face down during dinner, carrying it into the bathroom, deleting messages. One night, when it buzzed while he was in the shower, I glanced at the screen. Just one name, Riley. My heart stopped. I didn't open it then. Not yet. Because part of me still wanted to believe the lie more than face the truth. But the evidence kept piling up like cracks in a dam. Jewelry store receipts tucked in his suit pocket. Credit card statements showing expensive gifts. Weekends where business trips suddenly required no phone signal. I confronted him once, gently. "Are you seeing someone, Richard?" He laughed, actually laughed. "Laura, please. At our age, I'm working overtime to keep us comfortable, not chasing women. Don't turn into one of those jealous wives." The tone he used condescending, patient, as if humoring a fragile child burned itself into my memory. Still, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe that the husband I'd built my life with wouldn't trade 30 years for something as cheap as lust. So I swallowed my suspicions, told myself I was being paranoid, and focused on work. Until the hospital call changed everything. The day after I saw the name Riley on his phone, Richard left for another late-night meeting. His phone charger was still on the counter. I stared at it for a full minute before curiosity or maybe self-preservation took over. I tried his passcode, our wedding anniversary. It opened. My stomach turned. Her number was saved between Mom and David. Messages filled the screen, hundreds of them. "You looked beautiful today. I'll bring soup tomorrow. Rest, my love. Soon, it'll just be us." And then, photos. Her face pale in a hospital bed, his hand in hers. That was when I saw it. A contact form. Emergency contact. Richard Bennett, fiancé. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was living a second life with a woman who believed he was single. But it didn't stop there. I dug deeper into the phone records, into our shared bank statements, transactions to a pharmacy I'd never heard of, rent payments for an address in Somerville, transfers from our joint account, large, frequent, precise. It felt like reading an obituary mine. Still, a nurse's mind is practical. When you discover a diagnosis, you don't panic, you gather evidence. So I called the hospital. "Hi, this is Laura Bennett. I'm arranging a flower delivery for a patient, Riley Harper, room 212. I just need her emergency contact name to include on the card." "Oh, that's sweet," the nurse said. "You mean Mr. Richard Bennett? Such a devoted man. He's here every day. You can tell how much he loves her." Loves her. I thanked her, hung up, and sat perfectly still for a full minute, the phone cold in my hand. 2 years, she'd said. They'd been together for 2 years. 2 years ago, our daughter graduated college. 2 years ago, Richard started traveling more. 2 years ago, I stopped recognizing my own husband. In that moment, the nurse in me, the one who'd spent decades diagnosing problems, finally diagnosed my marriage. Stage 4. Terminal. And this time, no treatment could save it. But even as my heart broke, another thought took root. Why a hospital? Why was this young woman under his name, his insurance, his care? Why was he visiting her daily? I opened my laptop and searched her name through medical public records. One article caught my eye. Local woman hospitalized after suspected overdose. Authorities report no foul play. Overdose, not an accident. Something twisted in my gut. A girl half my age nearly died, and my husband was the man by her side. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the reflection of myself in the mirror. My face looked older, sharper, but my eyes were clear for the first time in months. He wasn't just cheating. He was living a lie so intricate, so dangerous, that I couldn't even see its edges yet. And I whispered to my reflection, "You've spent your life saving others, Laura. Now it's time to save yourself." I didn't know it then, but that decision to stop crying and start searching was what would save me. Because what I was about to uncover next wasn't just infidelity. It was a plan. A careful, calculated plan. And I was its target. For 2 days after that hospital discovery, I moved through my house like a ghost. I went to work, smiled at patients, charted vitals, and gave out medications, but my mind was somewhere else. replaying every detail of the life I thought I understood. The bed we once shared, the dinners he skipped, the money that had quietly vanished. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was strategy. Cold, deliberate, and terrifyingly organized. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. Her name was Caroline Shaw, my oldest friend, my college roommate before our lives drifted apart. While I chose nursing, Caroline chose law enforcement. After retiring from the Charleston Police Department, she'd opened her own private investigation agency. If anyone could uncover what Richard was really hiding, it was her. When I showed up at her small office downtown, Caroline took one look at me and said, "You found something, didn't you?" I nodded, setting a stack of papers on her desk, bank statements, receipts, and copies of the hospital records I'd pulled using my credentials. Caroline flipped through them, her expression darkening. "This isn't just cheating, Laura," she murmured. "He's diverting money, changing accounts, setting up a second address under his name. How long's it been going on?" 2 years, I said quietly. But that's not all. The woman, Riley, she didn't have a car accident. It was an overdose, a suicide attempt. And Richard's listed as her fiancé, her emergency contact, and her medical proxy. Caroline leaned back in her chair, her instincts instantly on alert. Medical proxy? That gives him the right to make health decisions for her. Why would he need that? I stared down at my hands, twisting my wedding ring around my finger. I don't know, but I think whatever this is, it's not just about her. I think it's about me. Caroline didn't laugh or dismiss it. Instead, she turned to her computer and began typing, her detective's focus sharp and methodical. Within an hour, she'd found the lease for an apartment in Somerville, 2 bedrooms, 1 balcony, 1 secret life. Both names were listed, Richard Bennett and Riley Harper. The lease began 23 months ago, and the payments came directly from our joint account. My chest tightened as she did the math out loud. 23 months at $2,200 a month. That's over 50 grand, Laura, from your savings. $50,000 of my hard-earned overtime pay used to build the home of his affair. But that was only the beginning. Caroline dug deeper into the digital records, tracing Richard's phone calls and online activity. She found frequent contacts with Somerset Wellness Institute, a private psychiatric center just outside Charleston. Her brow furrowed as she clicked through a recovered transcript. "He called multiple times," she said slowly, asking about evaluation protocols, insurance coverage, and the legal process for guardianship of a spouse deemed mentally unfit. I felt the air leave my lungs. "What?" Caroline looked up at me, her voice calm but grim. "He's been preparing documents to claim that you're unstable. If a court believes that, he could gain control of your finances and medical decisions." I stared at her, the words barely registering. "That can't be possible." She sighed. "It's rare, but it's legal. If he gets a doctor to claim you're emotionally volatile or showing signs of early cognitive decline, he could petition for limited guardianship, especially if he has a concerned fiancé supporting his story." I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. "You think he's—" "Yes," Caroline said firmly. "He's setting you up, Laura." My world, already fractured, now cracked completely. The man I'd loved for 30 years wasn't just lying. He was orchestrating my destruction, one quiet signature at a time. But Caroline wasn't finished. She opened another file. I also found these, payments to the same psychiatric center, labeled Special Therapy Consultation and Extended Care Evaluation, over $15,000 total, all from your shared account. She turned the laptop toward me, revealing the notes from the financial department. Client requested guidance for 2 related cases, 1 patient under treatment, 1 spouse showing emotional instability following marital strain. 2 related cases. Riley Harper and me. I felt sick. He'd used the same facility for both of us. For her, the patient who loved him too much. For me, the wife who knew too much. I whispered, "He's going to make me look insane." Caroline reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "No, he's going to think he succeeded." That's the only way we beat him." I looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "You're going to give him exactly what he wants, a vulnerable wife who's too broken to see what's happening. You'll step out of the house, tell him you need time to think, make him believe you're falling apart. Then we install cameras. We document everything. We let him hang himself with his own arrogance." Her eyes gleamed with determination. "He thinks he's untouchable because he's careful, but careful men always slip when they think they've already won." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my dark living room, surrounded by memories that now felt like evidence. His voice on old voicemails, his handwriting on anniversary cards, his laugh echoing faintly from the past. I thought about the younger version of myself, who used to wait by the window for him to come home. I thought about the nurse who stayed calm under pressure, who handled crises every day. And I thought about the woman I was about to become, one who would stop pretending she didn't see the truth. By morning, the plan was in motion. Caroline arrived with small cameras, disguised as picture frames, clocks, and air fresheners. We placed them in every key room: living room, bedroom, kitchen, and hallway. Each one was synced to a private cloud account that only we could access. When we finished, Caroline stood back, studying the room. "From this point on," she said, "you act like you're emotionally done. Tell him you need time. Move in with me for a while. Once you're gone, he'll think he's free to move her in. And that's when we'll catch him." I took a deep breath and nodded. "What if he finds out?" Caroline smiled faintly. "Then he'll find out what it feels like to underestimate the wrong woman." That evening, I played my part. When Richard came home, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched tea and said softly, "We need some space, Richard. I need to think." He blinked, pretending to be concerned but barely hiding the relief in his eyes. "Maybe that's for the best," he said. "You can stay with your sister for a while, clear your head." I nodded, my voice steady. "Yes, that's what I'll do." As he walked away, I realized he'd already written my obituary in the language of mental instability and emotional weakness. But he didn't know that the woman he thought was breaking down was actually standing up for herself. When I closed the door behind him that night, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness. And what he did next would be caught on camera, every word, every lie, every cruel gesture. The truth was coming for him. And it would arrive wearing the calm smile of a nurse who'd finally stopped saving everyone else and started saving herself. 3 days after I left the house, the cameras caught everything. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Richard's black Mercedes pulled into our driveway. But he wasn't alone. I sat in Caroline's apartment 2 blocks away, watching the live feed on her monitor. My stomach twisted as the passenger door opened. Riley Harper stepped out fragile, pale, walking slowly, her arm hooked through my husband's. He helped her up the porch steps, used the key I'd given him 30 years ago, and unlocked my front door. The cameras clicked to life. "There it is," Caroline whispered. "He just crossed the line." On screen, Richard was smiling as he guided Riley inside. He carried her bag, set it gently on my couch, and began showing her around as though she'd bought the place. I watched him open the bedroom door, my bedroom, and say, "You'll rest here for now. It's peaceful. You'll like it." Peaceful. That was the same word he'd used to convince me to move into that house decades ago. As the hours passed, the cameras captured everything: him cooking in my kitchen, her laughing, him touching her hand. But it was what they said that gutted me. "Whose things are these?" Riley asked, holding up one of my framed family photos. Richard chuckled softly. "Just some old memories. The woman who used to live here couldn't let go of the past." He took the picture from her hands and set it face down on the counter. "We'll redecorate soon. This house is ours now. Ours." Riley smiled faintly. "What happened to her?" "She's not well," he said, his tone perfectly rehearsed. "The stress, the loneliness. She's been having trouble separating fantasy from reality. I had to let her go stay with family for her own good." I gripped the armrest of my chair, every muscle in my body trembling with fury. He wasn't just cheating. He was erasing me. and I wasn't going to let him finish the job. By the third day, we had enough footage to bury him in court. But Caroline wanted more. "He's a public man," she said. "He hides behind charm and reputation. You want justice? We give him an audience." That's how the idea of the dinner of reckoning was born. I called Richard that Thursday, my voice fragile and apologetic. "Richard, I've been thinking," I said softly. "Maybe we shouldn't just end things quietly. We owe it to our families to explain what's happening. Could you come for dinner Saturday? Just a few people, your parents, our kids, some close friends." There was a pause. Then, the voice of a man who thought he'd already won. "That's very mature of you, Laura. Yes, I think that's a good idea." "Good," I whispered. "I'll cook one last time, like old times." He had no idea that Caroline had already contacted everyone on the guest list. His law partner, his parents, our children Ethan and Maya, and a few neighbors who admired him. Each of them had received the same message. "Please come. There's something you need to see." Saturday arrived clear and warm, a deceptive kind of beauty. I returned to the house early that afternoon. Richard and Riley had left earlier that morning. Our footage showed them at her apartment. I walked through the front door, my steps deliberate, and stared around the living room. The photos of my family were gone. My grandmother's vase was missing. The place smelled like her perfume. Caroline arrived an hour later with a laptop and small speakers. "Everything's ready," she said. "Once he's seated, you take control. No anger, no tears, just truth." By 6 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. Richard's parents were first. His mother hugged me awkwardly, whispering, "I'm so sorry, dear. He said you've been unwell." I smiled politely. "That's what he told you, huh?" Then came our children, visibly confused but trying to stay calm. Finally, Richard walked in, wearing his best suit and that same self-satisfied smile that once made me weak. "Laura," he said warmly, kissing my cheek. "Thank you for doing this. It means a lot." He turned to the guests. "I thought this would be a good chance for closure. My wife has been struggling, but we're handling things amicably." The gall of him made my hands twitch, but I smiled sweetly. "Yes, dear, amicably." Dinner was quiet, uneasy. The clink of silverware filled the silence until I set my fork down and said, "Actually, there's something I'd like to show everyone before dessert." Richard frowned. "Laura, maybe now's not." I ignored him and walked to the laptop Caroline had set on the counter. The room went still as I pressed play. The speakers filled with the unmistakable sound of Richard's voice. "She's just someone I used to know," he said on the recording. "The woman who lived here before. That's all over now." Gasps rippled through the table. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. Ethan stared at his father, eyes wide. Richard shot to his feet. "Laura, where did you?" "Sit down," I said quietly. My voice had a weight it hadn't in years. "You'll want to hear the rest." The next clip played, Richard's laugh. "She got old. Some people just stopped being interesting." Every word echoed like a hammer against the perfect image he'd built. Caroline stepped forward, placing a stack of documents on the table. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Caroline Shaw, a licensed private investigator. Mrs. Bennett hired me after discovering her husband was misusing joint funds and preparing fraudulent legal documents. She laid out bank statements, receipts, and psychiatric reports. Mr. Bennett has been paying for private medical treatment for a woman named Riley Harper, using Laura's money. Simultaneously, he contacted the Somerset Wellness Institute to inquire about declaring Laura mentally unfit in order to seize full financial control. The room erupted in disbelief. Richard turned pale, sweat beading at his temples. "That's ridiculous." Caroline pressed a button on her phone. Another recording played Richard's voice, clear and calm. "If she loses touch with reality, it'll be easier for everyone. I can manage her assets, handle her care. It's for her own good." His law partner, David Cole, stood abruptly. "Richard, this is criminal. You'd lose your license for this." Richard's mother whispered, "My God, what have you done?" The room dissolved into murmurs, but I spoke over them, steady and cold. "You wanted to erase me, Richard. You wanted to make me disappear quietly so you could keep your perfect life intact, but you forgot who I am. I've spent 30 years watching people survive pain worse than death. I know what resilience looks like. I took a deep breath and looked straight at him. And now, so do you. Richard tried to speak, but the words failed him. His hands shook as Caroline handed him a thick envelope. "Those are divorce papers," she said, "filed this morning. And a restraining order. You'll be hearing from your licensing board soon, too." Ethan stood beside me, his face pale but resolute. "You disgust me," he said quietly to his father. Maya wiped tears from her cheeks. "Mom, let's go." I nodded, gathering my purse. But before leaving, I turned one last time. "You taught me something, Richard," I said softly. "When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. The woman you tried to erase will be the one they remember." And with that, I walked out into the cool South Carolina night, free, steady, and alive. Behind me, the man who thought he'd written my ending was watching his own story collapse. It's been a year since that night. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear the soft rumble of Richard's car in the driveway, or the clink of his coffee mug in the kitchen. Habits like that take time to die. But when the silence settles, it no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Richard tried to fight it. Of course, claimed I'd entrapped him, said the recordings were manipulated. But facts have a way of surviving lies. The court saw everything. The bank statements, the recordings, the psychiatric paperwork. His reputation collapsed faster than even Caroline predicted. He lost his license, his firm, and the respect of every person who once believed in him. He walked out of that courtroom stripped of everything he'd built, with my help, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel pity. I felt closure. The settlement granted me the house, half of his remaining assets, and restitution for the money he stole. I could have retired comfortably right there, but I didn't. I wasn't done living. I went back to nursing this time not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I accepted a position as Director of Patient Care at Charleston Mercy Hospital, the same hospital where I first met Richard 30 years ago. The first morning I walked in wearing my new badge, I stopped by the window overlooking the courtyard. The magnolias were in bloom, their scent clean and strong. I smiled. Life, I thought, finds a way to bloom again if you let it. I started seeing a therapist too, something I'd once thought was only for other people. She told me something that stayed with me. You can't control who betrays you, but you can control how you rise. And rise I did. My children visit often now. Ethan says he's proud of me for not letting bitterness win. Maya told me she's learned more about strength from watching me rebuild than she ever did from any advice I gave her. As for Riley, she reached out through her counselor months after the trial. She apologized, said she never knew about me, that Richard told her we were divorced years ago. I believed her. She was young, lost, and broken in her own way. I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. Because healing isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. Now, in this new chapter of my life, my mornings are quiet. I drink my coffee by the window, sunlight spilling over the table. No lies, no pretending, just me. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to this story to remember, it's this. If your heart ever whispers that something is wrong, listen. Don't excuse the silences, the secrets, the late-night lies. Peace built on denial isn't peace, it's poison. Real love doesn't demand blindness. Real love doesn't shrink you. And real healing begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to save you and choose to save yourself instead. Thank you for listening to my story. Wherever you're hearing this from, I hope it reaches the part of you that's ready to wake up. Because I promise you, life after betrayal doesn't just exist. It shines.